Welcome, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to an infield chat sponsored by Valle Sporting Goods. I'm here with Tyler Packanik and Brandon Szink. Guys, what we're going to be doing today is answering some fan questions. I'm going to say fan questions, but it's more of the public's questions when it comes to infield play. So, guys, let's dive right into this. Question number one. My kiddo is terrified of getting in front of the ball. What can I do to help?
For me, right, it's like building confidence up, right? That's probably problem number one. So we still got to teach the mechanics of fielding a ground ball, et cetera, catching a ball. So I'm mixing in tennis balls, smash balls, foam balls, whatever, to just build that confidence up that the kid knows, hey, I can catch this, and then we can progress to using a baseball.
Yeah, I think back to when I was younger, and I wouldn't say I was ever afraid of the baseball or afraid of the ball, but I agree with Tyler. I think mixing in tennis balls, Cody, I saw you do this the other day, mixing in soccer balls with younger kids. But I think it's just about repetition and like Tyler said, creating confidence, just hammer it home with them and use balls that they're not going to be afraid of.
For sure. For sure. And I like what we got with the soccer balls. It was kind of like a happy byproduct of that was they really did start to feel shaped and the positions they needed to be in when it comes to not just fielding the ball, but continuing their momentum towards a target. And so when you get a bigger ball to receive like that, it makes things visually for sure easier for the young ones. And then obviously as a soccer ball, it's not going to kick up like that. And for guys who maybe have the tendency to pull the head back, that provides a little bit more reassurance. And again, that I'm a huge fan of using the tennis balls as well. That's something where if you're on a maybe not so level surface, aka any field north of the Mason-Dixon, we're looking at a little bit more adjustability being needed. And so those tennis balls are kind of good to teach that too, because you get a little bit more of an exaggerated hop sometimes.
Yeah, I think, Cody, one last thing to that. I think if you add some competition to it, I think kids kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone a little bit. If they're working against somebody else, I just feel like we see it here at the facility here, right, where we add a kind of short-sighted game, and they're pushing themselves past whatever that limitation is, if it's mental or physical.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Brandon. I also makes me think of like we've seen that drill of Tatis where he put the mask on and he's like working behind the ball. Now that might be a little bit more advanced, right? Because if I have a kid that's really afraid of the baseball, we're going to use tennis ball and stuff. But as you progress, maybe it's hey, throw the mask on and everything I'm working on, like every time I catch a ground ball or a thrown ball, like I want to check to see where his head is. Is it behind his glove, right? And reward him for doing so.
I like that. That's a good call. All right, next thing, kind of on the same route of kind of developing the younger players too. But we can also turn this into something where we address it for higher level players. But what are some throwing drills for accuracy?
For me, like it all starts in catch play too, right? So catch play is most important. Like if we can't play catch, we can't expect them to go out on the field and make plays either. So it's got to be an emphasis in catch play. For throwing accuracy, I think of mechanics, right? It's that simple. Taking video and looking at the throwing mechanics. Something's got to be wrong there if we're struggling with our accuracy of throwing. And then the last piece is it seems super elementary, but following our throw, right? If we can't follow our throw, maybe our front side's off in our mechanics, or maybe a kid just like throws it and veers off like all of our direction, which is then, on the front end, if I'm falling off, that's going to make something happen on the back end, So for me, it's like, okay, follow the throw. Let's video the mechanics of the throwing there, see what's going on. And then I guess like a simple drill is also just throw up a target and practice throwing at it.
I like that. I think one of the things that I see with especially college level guys is the angles they take and the movements they start to introduce post reception. a lot of the times works into negative space. They're not being super efficient towards their target. Now, there are also a lot of guys who get away with that well. And there's some guys who need that because they're not, usually it's a hip mobility problem. They're not mobile enough to continue to drive towards their target. They have to create that. It's almost like a drop step to open up their hips and work through, especially guys who are working really low on like a two-step pattern. But one of the things that I think benefit not just that area, but also understanding how our weight moves is like an attention to detail when we're going through our dynamic warm-ups and understanding how our body's moving. Because a really simple fix for a lot of guys is creating good direction towards their target, which if you've seen really good groups play catch, one that comes to the top of my mind right now is Georgia Gwinnett. Watching them play catch in the amount of direction they create during their throws is really impressive. And they don't ever start throwing off a back foot or even losing any momentum until more progressed into their catch play routine, where they start to work on some backhand moves where they have to plant and go, where they start throwing on the run, stuff like that. So just the introduction of the direction post reception is pretty important to me when it comes to trying to get guys more consistent with their accuracy.
Yeah, and to that too, like I don't know if there's necessarily just certain drills just for throwing accuracy. Like what you're talking about, what I'm talking about is there's something going on with the mechanics to lead to inaccurate throws, right? So it's as simple as videoing and watching. Even, we did defensive evaluations for our guys a week ago, and we were just talking about it before we hopped on. Like even at the college level, we have guys that, there's some bad throwing mechanics because they've never been taught. They've never even looked at video of them throwing. A very common problem for, I think, our guys from just, doing this for so many years is nobody knows how to use their front side in throwing. And boom, and that's a very easy fix, and it could be a huge problem to leading to inaccurate throws.
Yeah, I like that. And so on that same path, I got another question here. This is from Anonymous. It says, why do coaches like hard throwers?
Zink's got a bunch on his team, so let's hear it, Zink.
He's got some cannonballs there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this answer's kind of obvious. If we're talking about hard throwing infielders, it's guys that can range a certain way and get the ball out quick, and it's going to get there in time versus a softer throwing guy that's maybe got to range a little bit, and now it's a free base because you can't make that throw. That's as plain and simple, I think, as you can get.
Yeah, I think too, and this is something I talk to our guys about. Like at the end of the day, I need infielders that can get the ball over to first base before 4.25, because that's our marker for a green runner, guy that's run under a 4.25. I need infielders that can get the ball over before a 4.25. Now, there's guys that can, if we go do a velo test, they're going to throw 85, but they have an understanding of whether it's a 2-step, 4-step pattern that they need to do, rock throw, and they do a great job, and they still get it over there before 4.25. And then I have guys that throw 94 across the diamond, but it takes them 4.35, and that's not going to get the job done. But what Zink's saying right now, if I can maximize arm velo and maybe reach 90 miles per hour or harder, and I can figure out, internal clock and what footwork pattern I need to do, that just creates more range for players, and ultimately that's what we're looking for as coaches.
You could also argue like it helps with recovery if a guy boots a ball. It helps with the recovery piece of it and fielding it, picking it up, and firing it over there.
Yeah, keeps you in the game if you make a misstep. I dig it. And I got another question here along the same lines, and it says, "What can I do to throw harder?" I know, at least in my experience, I always thought of my catch play as a kind of progression into like arm strength building. Is that something you guys throw into your stuff too?
Yeah, I mean, again, we were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on. For me, catch play is really important to all of us, right? I know, and I think I'm pretty safe in saying that from just knowing you guys. Catch play is really important. So once we touch a baseball, That's the most important thing. We need to make sure that we're loosening up to play catch. We don't play catch to get loose. So that piece, what you do on the front end to make sure that catch play is so important is really important to me. For me, we do bands, we do weighted balls. Now that's obviously I'm dealing with Division I athletes, and we're monitoring, and we have the resources to make sure they're safe and doing it right.
Do you guys have anybody who works long toss into their progressions?
Yeah, so we break our throwing days up to light, moderate, and heavy. Every heavy day, I want long toss. There's some people out there that hate long toss and all that, but I kind of ride that middle ground of old school, new school, and that, because I think long toss also does a lot of good things. Teaches guys to use their legs and not just their arms. Now, if I'm in the dugout not paying attention to their long toss, then that's not really good either. Right now, that could cause some injuries. But I'm there for every catch play routine. So on our heavy days, we're long tossing. And I don't care if they throw the ball high in the air. Like, that's what I want. I want to see how far they can throw it. And that's where they can start to challenge themselves, push themselves to build some velo. And then when they work in, that's almost probably, arguably probably the most important time of it, because now they're starting to bring it down and they're kind of maxing out their velo to build that arm strength.
I like long toss too. I'm on the same wavelength as Tyler, but I think long toss forces guys, especially if you're moving them a little bit prior to the throw, forces them to use different arm angles, different arm slots. I think some guys get really comfortable if they're working, 90 feet to 90 feet every day. I think guys get comfortable with the same arm slot, and I think just forcing them, like I said before, like out of their comfort zone of, what they're so used to is beneficial in the long term.
Yeah, I dig it.
What have you done, Cody? Like, where are you at on all that?
So I'm a big fan of band work prior. That's kind of my process. And then, to be honest with you, as a player, I long toss probably too much. I was a guy who, one of my tools was I had a pretty strong arm, and so I wanted to make sure I continued to develop that tool. But I think, like you said, like, there is a middle ground that you kind of have to ride, because I've also seen guys who don't throw near enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they do kind of stagnate when it comes to the development of that tool. So in my opinion, with the guys that I've worked with in the past, we try to structure it so it's a little bit, we kind of alternated days. And again, some of the groups that I've worked with, we've had 4-day limits when it comes to practice times. So being able to rotate days in that fashion helped. Now, working with Eckerd last season, we were pretty much a go 24/7. So in that scenario, we had to really keep an eye on, hey, you're working with a pretty heavy load here. We just had, a full week and a pretty big series this weekend. Let's pull back on Monday, Tuesday a bit, and again, still throwing. There's never really a day where we're not playing catch. But again, the weight of that has to be a little bit more felt, I think person to person as we go throughout the season. But diving into those pieces as well, when it comes to recruiting, and you guys have both worked in that space a lot. Is there a certain set of skills? And again, the way it's worded is, what do recruiters look for in shortstops? But let's broaden that a little bit to just infielders in general. But what do recruiters look for in terms of those kind of guys? And we'll kind of narrow it down to defense only here.
Go ahead, Szink.
Well, I was just going to say, and this might merge the last three questions. I think how an infielder or how an infielder sequences his upper and lower half, I think is super important. And when we're talking about being a better thrower, showcasing as a good infielder, I think how you sequence your feet and your arm, and we're talking weighted balls, we're talking long toss, we're talking bands, all this different stuff. But if an infielder can't, a player in general, if he can't sequence his lower half with his upper half, Cody, you kind of mentioned it earlier with hip mobility stuff. Like, if a player can't do that, I don't think he's going to be very effective in the long term. So I think seeing that, working on that, mixing that into our catch play, into our I don't know how, I don't know how much you guys have done it with band work and weighted balls, but catch play, especially, like moving guys left, right, in, out, making them, forcing them outside of just the step and throw stuff, I think is super important. And then just like having guys, I keep saying it, but having guys kind of push past their limits a little bit, just to strengthen that arm and that tool. And then as we're talking about seeing or players showcasing, I think it's important just for them to, and I had this conversation with one of my lessons yesterday, being able to move quicker, being able to move off the hit a little bit quicker, being explosive with that first step, whether it's left, right, in, and then sequencing their body from catch to transition to throw, I think is super important, and just smoothing that out. If players can be smooth with that, and I know Tyler talks about it a lot. Just I would video yourselves as players and see how you move, because I think some players, and I'm probably guilty of this too as a player, like I always thought I was moving super quick, but then when I watched it real time and really, I mean, you can probably even put a clock on yourself. You really dive into it. You maybe not moving as quick or as fluid as you think you are. So, yeah, I think just kind of mixing in different ways of seeing yourself and moving and pushing yourself past maybe what you're comfortable doing is gonna help you become a better infielder and then showcase a little bit better.
I don't know, Szink. I've seen you take some ground balls, and you look pretty good out there.
Oh yeah.
Well,
for me, at 35, it's not as good as it used to be.
Well, I don't know. I think me and you were 2Bs only, right? So we weren't good enough to play shortstop, but that's all right. For me, it's three things. The first thing I look at is effort, and I dive into the prep step. If I'm recruiting a kid or scouting a kid, and they can't even show me the effort, it stops there, because it tells me they don't care about it. And it's really hard for me as a coach to teach the care factor. So that's the first one, just effort all together. Second one's footwork, and it's broad, but it's footwork, right? There's, I believe in my teaching, and I can help players. So like if there's something I see that I'm like, I don't like, that's fine, but I know I can teach it and help that kid get better. But footwork altogether, just like, do they have good feet? Do they have an understanding of fielding timing? All of that is really important. And then the last piece, and we've kind of hit on it today, is just arm efficiency, right? And I kind of pair the accuracy along with the velo, right? And on that scale, in my head, is if a guy's throwing 70 across the diamond, but they're super accurate, it's still going to be a lower score. But if that guy he throws 85 and he's super accurate, that score is going to be higher than the guy that throws 90 and can't hit a target. So those are the three biggest things that I look for when kind of, recruiting an infielder.
For sure. I know one of the things that I found it difficult to get used to when I was first starting was that infield evaluation, because that's my discipline. I wanted to make sure I really knocked that out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And so, man, I forget who told me this. They had mentioned something about having a sticky mitt. Mm-hmm. And so when I watch guys, and that translates to me as like, okay, are they receiving this ball in the kill zone, right? Is this something where when the ball makes contact with their glove, it goes dead? You don't see rattle. Mm-hmm. And so that evolved into, if that's happening, is the transfer clean? If those two things happen, oftentimes you're seeing really good direction because they've matched pace. They've taken really forgiving routes to be able to kill that ball.
Probably seeing good footwork.
Yeah, I mean it's all of the above, and so at least for me, as an earlier coach, I was trying to do as much as I could to kind of ease that process of seeing that player and evaluating him. And so really identifying whether or not they were killing the ball, whether or not the mitt looks sticky, that solved a lot of the footwork issues. That solved mm-hmm. a lot of the body position issues that I'd maybe be looking at before. And so instead of having this big overwhelming picture, I now had, okay, I can look at this point and say, okay, this solves glove presentation issues. This solves footwork. This solves a little bit about posture. And then from then, like, Tyler, you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to arm efficiency. That's the best way to put it, I think. Arm strength is kind of vague. Accuracy only plays into one thing, which it's great if you can hit the target on the money. But if it's
mm-hmm.
Taking an hour and a half to get there, that's not going to get the job done. So just seeing it. I think even from a tempo standpoint, are they in rhythm? Do we have a really late arm? I see a lot of high school players, especially in showcase environments, when they're trying to pull down, like they'll land really hard on their front foot, and then you'll see this huge separation between their front foot landing and their arm coming through. And you just don't see that a whole lot with really good infielders. It kind of looks like a whip when they go through. And so for me, I think just a constant motion of the ball from the kill spot. You see the ball kill, you see it stick in the mitt, and then the ball stays in motion until it reaches the first baseman's mitt. And so there are some things there where you take that into a college setting, and you can dive into that and whatever our preferences are, whether we want to make that transition in the middle of our body or whatever. I'm not really looking at that in that space. I just want to see if they're able to present the glove correctly and kill the ball, because that solves a ton of problems.
Yeah. Well, to that point, and that's kind of what I was getting to as well, is like, I think early in my like coaching career, and I started watching younger infielders, like, me being an infield guy, I was like super critical. And, I was like, man, I don't really like this infielder. Oh, I don't really like that. But then as, I've gotten older, it's like, okay, well, I know I can teach that and help that kid, like what you're talking about. Maybe it's transferring at the center part, right? Maybe a younger kid doesn't do that, but the ball sticks a lot, right? And it's like, well, there's something to that. Now, can I help him figure out the transfer in the center of his body? And I don't know how you guys feel. Have you guys found yourselves being super critical when looking at infielders versus maybe even outfielders or pitchers?
I was actually just about to say this. I think, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it. I think in the scouting world, now depending on what exactly you're looking for, I think you're going to look for athletes first, and then mechanics second. Like, you almost have to believe in yourself enough as a coach to say, I can take this super athletic kid and turn him into an infielder or an outfielder or whatever I need, versus I can take this kid that's super fundamental but might not have the arm or the footwork that I'm exactly looking for, or the tempo, like Cody mentioned. I think you can definitely take athletes. If you believe in yourself and have that time, you can take athletes and turn them into whatever you want. I think that's why we see shortstops go early and they can get pushed to right field or center field or second base, because they're able to do that with their feet and their arm and their quickness, their first step, and all this different stuff that we look for.
Yeah, I mean, especially when I think in any space, like we're all infield heavy when it comes to our discipline focuses, but I found it almost impossible I'd say my first month of recruiting to find someone that I liked. And there were some great players. I ended up going back and watching a lot of those guys later on. And it was the summer when I had started, but I was like, man, I didn't like him when I watched him last. And I think, at least in my head, I kind of had to really dive into what kind of access to information have these players had? Have these players been taught well? Is this something where they're just, by no fault of their own, ignorant to this, the way this is taught? Or maybe you start to identify, oh no, this is more of an effort issue, which is that's my red flag. So there are some things there where, especially when it came to infield play early on, that there needed to be some humility on my end to understand, like, I personally, this is not something that I knew. Why am I judging these kids on what I know now when they haven't had access to this information or even the time to develop this in this space, right? It changes things.
Yeah, 100%.
So diving in to the next question, we've got, who's the best second baseman in the MLB and why? This is from Casey in Arizona.
All you, Brandon.
Well, I think it's Andres Gimenez. I could be a little bit biased because I've been a Guardians fan, but I just think he's athletic enough. I mean, it's funny. Like, you listen to the fans and you watch the games, and I just feel like he's a shortstop playing second base. Just an overall athleticism standpoint, you won a Gold Glove. Cody, I know you're gonna give reasons why he's not. So go ahead, you can jump in.
So, hey, Andres Gimenez, in my opinion, is probably one of the most natural defenders in the game right now, regardless of position. So I'll say that. And so what we've got here from Fangraphs is we've got Gimenez rocking a 19 DRS, which currently is second behind Bryce Terang, who would have currently been my pick. Now, when we look at OAA, things change because DRS and OAA are slightly different metrics in terms of how they're collected and evaluated. Gimenez is leading the league in OAA at 18, Jimenez actually is the most consistent across the board when it comes to this evaluation. If you look at Turang's OAA, he's actually at a 6. 5 now. Correct. 5 now. Okay, so you're looking at a guy in Jimenez who scores really well through 2 different avenues. Beyond that, his track record is ridiculous. He's a guy who, if we wanted to say who was the best second baseman over the past, 3 or 4 years, Jimenez's name probably should be the only one in the conversation when it comes to defensive play. But again, if you're looking at a guy like Turang, I think there are some things that he brings to the table from just a pure athleticism standpoint, and Jimenez is incredibly gifted too. But you look at like a top end speed type guy like Turang, that really does add to some ground coverage. And then again, taking the question in context from a defensive only standpoint, both of those guys are kind of in a league of their own. Now, earlier in the season, I would have tossed Ketel Marte's name in there. He's had a rough second half lately, but he's a guy too that like there's definitely a level where there's a cutoff, and then you see these other guys up there.
I think that's a great question for next time too. I want you to dive into the difference between defensive run saves and outs above average with us.
Oh yeah, we're nerd out on advanced analytics. I'm in.
Yep.
I can do that.
Yeah.
We might get Mark Simon.
I'm gonna write that down. So next time we hit on
next
that.
time.
Yeah.
Next time you guys are asking questions out there, make sure you toss in the advanced analytics questions.
Yeah.
All right. So next is from John from Ohio. He just typed footwork drills. So footwork drills. What do we have to maybe promote some better footwork?
For me, short ground balls, short distance ground balls, it kind of enhances that focus on those certain types of ground balls, right? So that shortened distance, we can work straight out, we can work our 2-hand lane, we can start to grasp an idea of timing versus, we really spread out, we get really far, a lot of problems can happen, right? So I like just kind of shortening that distance and enhancing that focus on a certain footwork pattern for fielding, whether it's my 2-hand lane, whether it's on the run, come get it, whether it's backhand, forehand. Me, that's, I'm a big proponent on that. I think with younger kids, you can get the feet moving, you can work around cones, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, we want to get better at what we're going to do in a game, and that is fielding a ground ball. And I just think that shorter distance, whether it's machine or short fungo, is the best way to do so.
I agree with that. I think mixing in line drills, ladder drills, landmarks where players have to, stay within a certain frame. I agree with Tyler. I think short ground balls are the way to go. But getting guys to just kind of feel themselves move in space and adding in a ground ball or a catch piece after that. Like we've seen Kai's line drills. I've done a drill where like they chop their feet and they have to cross over at a certain point, or where they have to walk the line to approach the ground ball just to feel themselves move in space and then speed up, kind of push them a little bit to the catch point. But yeah, those are the things that I've done. Cody, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty widely accepted that you see really good defenders have fast feet. Mm-hmm. Like if you have, I think there's some conviction within that too. It's not just that they're quick; it's that they're really confident in the moves they make. And there are times where guys make incorrect moves, and that's where that maybe pocket presentation or the ability to be aggressive with a rake move comes in to save someone. But in my opinion, if I'm really trying to dive into the footwork of a certain movement, I'm a fan of mapping it. So, for example, if you're on a dirt field and we're drilling, let's say a move to the defender's left, and they're a right-handed thrower, they're tracking to their left, I'll map out a route kind of in the dirt to where, okay, this is a ball that we kind of have to range for, but this isn't at the edges of your range. How do we get to this ball in the most forgiving route to where you can attack? Let me say that better. So you can make your move in a better position. Because there are some times where kids will just kind of dive directly to an intersect point and not give themselves much of a chance to create space on a hop or take space away on a hop. And so there are some times where maybe that move needs to be more lateral first, as opposed to something where they just kind of dive in. That way they give themselves more forgiveness to see a hop. And I think it's funny. The beauty of this space when it comes to like hop reading and pattern work is a lot of it's dependent on the speed of a runner, the speed of the ball that's struck, the angle. So I, in my opinion, I'm a huge fan of adding the footwork into that space. I've done ladder drill before. I've done stuff where I've worked kind of like a 3-cone type thing to speed up the feet. I just think as a player, I used to get more out of it when I mapped it into like a lifelike play.
Yeah.
So finding ways to speed up the feet, to make guys more decisive, to move with more conviction, and to provide more forgiving routes, give them more options to intersect the ball at. That seems to me to be working the best for where I'm at now.
There's a time and place for like the ladders and cones, right? And
Yeah.
whether that's the weight room or agility training, but when it comes to the ground balls, I like what you're saying. It's it's almost, for me, it's like working backwards. Okay, this is at contact of catch. This is what we need it to look like. Now let's work backwards, and how do we get to that point? But doing so by reading an actual ball, because that's what you're going to do in the game, is really important to me too.
I think players understanding like what's after the catch too, and where how their body needs to be moving in space post catch as well. I think like Cody, you started to hit on it. Like some players are super controlled and some players are super out of control, but they get to the baseball. I think looking for quickness and efficiency and almost like tempo too. I know I talked to yesterday. I had a player in here that we just had to talk about tempo because he was super quick, got to the ball really quick, but just out of control and kind of control. We had to almost dial it back to control his feet, get the tempo under control a little bit more, so that way he could catch and throw and be efficient with the transition.
I think there's a really cool similarity in the space of understanding what hop to attack at and what routes to use paired with base running. Because when I teach these in similar ways when it comes to your decision making, because you want to play with this like patient aggression that you're making the right moves at the right time, but you're also under control, but you're also not too passive, and it's a really weird line to walk. And when it comes to like identifying an offense and trying to say, hey, here's our offensive beliefs, it's really hard to walk that middle line. It's almost always, hey, we're gonna play for the next at bat. We're gonna kind of keep the line moving, so we're gonna be a little bit more passive on a ball to take an extra base on, or it's, hey, we're gonna be pretty aggressive. We're gonna push the envelope. We're gonna try to make the pipes burst. With a really good offense and with really good infield play, I think that you find that there's a confidence in the move, right? When we're aggressive with our confidence, but I don't think there's so much aggression that it turns into like this chaotic, out of control attack, right? And you see that a lot with younger players too, because from my experience, like the cue was like, go get the ball. And oftentimes as they get older, the balls are struck in a way that you need to let the ball come to you, right? So there are some times where finding that middle ground is important. I think the best defenders in our game right now are guys who recognize that soonest and can allow themselves to put their bodies in the right positions to either attack, retreat, then attack. So it just depends on the hop and the runner and being able to read that space. Last question for you guys here. This question is from DJ in New York. Can you tell us the main differences between pro players and college players?
Brandon, you got to go first because you've worked in professional baseball before.
Yeah.
Throwing you on the spot.
I would say routines and routines number one, and then probably just confidence and just understanding who they are as a player. Number two.
I dig it. So in my mind, right, if I'm picturing a professional player, and when I look at the skill acquisition process, let's say we're introducing a new tool to the toolbox, there's going to be failure and a lot of it when you're introducing new tools. But I think, Brandon, what you mentioned, like that confidence is something where, and I've heard this from a lot of guys who have spent time in the pro space, but the way the professional players are able to attain information and make physical adjustments happens quicker. I think a lot of that comes from the confidence in their abilities. Like, you don't get that bug of like, oh, I'm not good enough to make that move. Like, you see how quickly they get over a failure. And I think especially at developmental levels, I was lucky enough for the past year and a half to be in Florida and surrounded by some really great developmental organizations and watch how their coaches spoke to their players. And the amount of intent behind the moves that they're making, I'm talking from the coach's standpoint, they are so descriptive in the adjustments they want to see. And you see the players and the way they receive the information. And especially the good relationships. You can tell when there's a good relationship and the players really wanting to learn from this coach. But the amount of affirmation in the body language when they're receiving the coaching is really, really special. And I've seen that at the college space too. I've seen that at the college space, and usually those are the players who last the longest in that space and get a shot sometimes to go play pro ball. But the ability to kind of kick failure off pretty quick and keep moving. And again, like Brandon said, maintain that confidence and the ability to say, hey, I'm learning this, but I'm also really, really good. And so that's a continuing process, I think. I don't think that's ever a position where they're like, yeah, we're good enough. We're just going to do rep work now. They're always trying to develop and add a new tool to the toolbox.
If we're just talking generalities too, I think we got to remember that pro players have a lot more time, and that is also their livelihood that they're working towards. Whereas, you guys know college players have girlfriends and classes and all the other outside factors. Pro players have time, and they're at the field for 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day. So they can try things. They can, work on things a little bit more and not have kind of these outside distractions, if you will.
But I think before confidence, you have consistency. And that's what I was going to say. Right. Because when you're consistent, it builds confidence in your routines, in your play, all of that stuff, like just your life in general. If you have some consistency there, stuff's not going to hit you by surprise, right? So that would be the biggest difference for me, is just consistency. Like you just mentioned a lot of things that, like us, colleges we deal with, you got classes to worry about. You're also trying to manage social life, and then you're also trying to manage baseball. It's usually the ones that are better at being consistent that then go on to play professional baseball. Those that get to professional baseball before, they're probably a little bit more consistent in their play, and leads to guys that are not as consistent in high school that lead to them going to college. Consistency is the biggest thing I think of. And then once you become consistent, you're going to build that confidence that you guys are talking about to then allow you to get into pro ball and, really rise to the top.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, guys, thanks for coming on. This is something that I know the people who are asking questions are going to get something out of. I know I learn something every time I jump on a call with you guys. Thank you to Valle Sporting Goods for sponsoring this episode. If you guys are interested in 10% off, there's a link in the description. Feel free to access that if you're looking for new training mitts, equipment, etc. And again, if you guys need anything, we're available. Reach out. You can access us through our social media websites and follow us on our platforms. Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you.